So, okay, well, welcome all. We have two members of the working group who are delayed getting here. One is Councillor Ian Reisman and the other is Rebecca Chandler-Wild.
I'm here now. Apologies for being late. Eden starts a session every Monday at 3:30 and it just completely ran past me that I needed to do that as quickly as possible. And then I started hoovering instead. I do apologise.
We all have that habit, don't worry, Kelly. We are missing Joseph Nicholson, and I think that's the lot so far, isn't it? Is that correct? Okay, so we're quorate in that respect. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest that you've received, Fiona?
No, those would normally be reported at the meeting, but nobody sent anything in advance.
Okay. And is there any public participation?
No, nobody has contacted me anyway to say they wanted to join. So
let's go through the minutes first of all. Are there any comments on the minutes that you've received? Any items that are missing or not covered, unless they're covered by this agenda?
No.
Okay, let's go on to the next item then, which is progress report on climate emergency and transport strategy. Fiona, would you like to lead us through that?
Tony, can you take a vote on the minutes?
Are we happy to vote on the minutes, approve them? Yes. In that case, I'll sign them. Thank you very much for that. That's quick.
thank you, Kath.
Thank you, Kath. I appreciate that. And the progress report on the climate emergency. This is page 7.
Yes, so you asked me some time ago to include a progress report in your meeting agenda, and I'm pleased now to have been able to do that. And I've done it jointly with the transport strategy projects also, because members had indicated that it was useful for them, as there were so many overlapping areas, for example, electric vehicle charge points. It was useful for members of this group to have sight of the progress of the transport strategy project. So this is the first progress report of this type that you have, and I hope you find it useful as anticipated, but do give me feedback on that. If there's anything I can do to make it more useful, please let me know. I wasn't proposing to go through it. I'm assuming people have had a chance to have a look, but I'm happy to take any questions if anybody wants to ask.
Are there any questions on the report? No? Okay, I think it's useful to have it. I suspect that not all of us have read it, and therefore, if you have any questions, could you please communicate them subsequently to Fiona? And Fiona, if you could respond and communicate to all of us if those questions arise, and with your answers as well. Thank you for that.
Sorry,
I think Jackie would like to ask a question.
Sorry, Jackie.
Sorry, I didn't have my hand up originally, Tony. I was just looking at the environmental weight restriction for HGV traffic, and there's been an article in the Henley Herald to say that this has been delayed. So I wondered if we needed to update that in this report.
I don't think it's been delayed. I think it's been cancelled, hasn't it?
No.
No? Okay. Patrick?
No, I mean, there's a setback because Burford have had theirs revoked. That doesn't mean to say that ours would be revoked, but almost certainly it will. It won't proceed, rather. But I think really this should really report what happens in committee or in working groups. So when this comes up at the next transport strategy group, then Fiona can report on what has happened. It will be updated after that. I think that would be the process.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you.
Okay. Are you happy with that, Fiona?
Yes, I mean, hopefully I can keep the report up to date with all the progress, including obviously the key decisions at the meeting. But once a decision is made, to let you know when things are being started. For example, now that the Transport Strategy Group and the council has agreed and the contract's been signed for electric vehicle charge points, a lot of the sort of month by month management of that project is delegated to me as the officer to do, and I just keep you up to date with where that's got to, even if it hasn't come back to a committee for further discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other queries or comments, Ken?
Just quickly, and I was speaking to
Ken, you've gone mute, I think. Or perhaps very quiet.
That's fine. Yeah, I was speaking to Kath and Jodie this morning about this. We were on the neighbourhood plan, and I spoke to a chap called Councillor Tim Bearder. He's a district councillor and a county councillor, and he is meant to be highway management. And because I was holding him responsible for this, but he then pushed it on to a chap called Duncan Enright, who is the travel and development strategy for OCC. And from what Tim was saying, that Burford have objected to them pulling the plug on this, and the fellow Duncan Enright, by all accounts, he's the one that's pulled the plug. But long term, according to Tim Bearder, they're meant to be setting up a lot of these ANPR sites around the county.
ANPR, it means what? Sorry.
I'm
That
not-
automatic number plate recognition.
Yeah, they're the ones. That's well done. Very good, Tony. That's why you're chairman. Yeah, so they're going to put these throughout the county at specific areas to check on what the problems exactly are throughout the county through HGVs. Just very brief, we had a quick chat on Burford, where, as Tim was trying to explain, Burford is totally different to Henley. Where Henley, we've got 2 or 3 major roads coming into the town, when all Burford have is just one road going through through the village, basically. So they pulled the plug on it for the time being, and so they're going to carry out this review through the county using these ANPR cameras, which they're hoping is going to give them all the information they will need, which is probably questionable, but one will never know until it's been completed.
Okay, thanks. Any comments on Ken's statement there?
Nope.
No, we all think it's great.
Yep.
Right. Thank you, Ken. And thank you, Fiona, for doing this, okay? Should we go to the next point on the agenda, which is the carbon footprint?
Sorry, Tony. It's Sarah here.
Yeah.
Can I just clarify if we are using the Zoom raise the hand, or if we're literally waving to raise a point? I just wondered if there was a...
Could you put your hand up? I must admit, I thought that you said also looks very useful. I thought that was a type of thing like that. So my mistake.
Okay. In which case I did have a question.
Right.
So it's just going back to that opening comment about the Henley Herald. Just wondering what communication is needed to go to the public, because I've read about it in other Facebook things as well.
Could you refer to me where the opening comment is in Henley Herald? Is this on the? Is this the progress report?
No. This is in regard to the weight restriction for HGV traffic.
Okay.
So it's just a case of how do we keep the public informed that how this is going or progressing or something like that. That was it.
Is this the second point, the environmental weight restriction for HGV traffic? I can't see anything about Henley Herald.
It's in relation to the comment that was raised. That's some video. Jackie, was that you? I can see you nodding your head.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Ken, sorry.
Well, let Patrick had his hand up first.
I would say, again, it's. I think Stefan probably has it in hand, and it's probably that piece of information he's waiting for before we have a transport strategy group meeting, And really, any clarification should come through that transport strategy group. Otherwise, if we start trying to go in and say things, it'll just muddy the water. I think that's something that Stefan, as chair of the transport strategy group, should manage. And Fiona now is aware of your comment, and I'm sure we'll talk to Stefan about how we manage the public aspect of it when we come to it at TSG.
Is that okay, Sarah? Yep. Okay. Thanks. Thanks for the sign. Right. Okay.
Jackie would like to.
Sorry, Jackie.
Only just wanted to add quickly that if there isn't a transport strategy group meeting next week, if the information hasn't come forward in time, then we should consider at that point what we might want to communicate from the council to update. Yeah.
Okay. Is that all right, Fiona?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah. Okay. Claudia, you had a newspaper in front of you, and you're on mute again.
Yeah, it was in the Henley Standard as well.
Just to support Sarah with her comments. So there are all sorts of articles in different media. So I think there's a valid point here. The public is getting all the messages, but maybe we should just comment and give our own.
No.
No?
No, leave it to Stefan. It's a transport strategy group issue. It just happens to be on here because Fiona is officer for both. We're climate emergency working group, and actually the 7.5 ton weight limit has very little to do with us. So we have to be careful not to muck up Stefan's strategy for trying to get the weight order.
But Stefan hasn't commented.
No, because he's on holiday.
Oh, right, okay. Okay, fine. Yeah.
He has commented elsewhere in the Henley Standard, if you want to look at that. But yeah, okay. I think the distinction between Transport Strategy Group and Climate Emergency Working Group is well made by Patrick, and I'd hate to step on Stefan's toes.
He's a big lad.
There's no comment from Ken by the looks of it.
I know. All I was going to say, obviously, the Henley Standard and the Henley Herald, which they both do a pretty good job. They obviously pick up information from here, there, and everywhere and make a story. I think where we are here, we're waiting for the correct information to come back from Oxford County Council and what they are specifically going to do, and we don't have that information. So it's pointless discussing something which we don't know anything about with the wrong information, which obviously is the Henley Standard and the Henley Herald, although they probably got it partly correct. So yeah, let's wait until the statements comes back from Oxford County Council on exactly what they are proposing. And I think that will be the time for Henley Town Council to respond to that.
Jackie?
Yeah, only one small bit of information that might be useful to add is that there was a motion brought to the last county council meeting, and that was to do with looking county-wide at the transport strategy. So it might be worthwhile noting that.
Fiona, I think that is worthwhile noting, but I think you've done a good job here. But may I suggest that for future progress reports, we separate out TSG from CWG, because a lot of our discussion just now has been on something which doesn't relate to us. And I know that's extra work for you, but it might be easier and make our meetings a bit smoother and stop Patrick getting uptight about things.
Yeah, it would only mean reorganising the table, which is not a big piece of work. So yeah, I can do that easily.
Okay. All right. Let's move on unless there are any other questions or comments. No? Okay. Let's move on to the carbon footprint. Would you like to talk the members of the group through it, please, Fiona?
Okay. So for some time now, we've been talking about the need to have a baseline figure for the council's carbon footprinting work, with a view to the council starting regular reporting on carbon emissions from April this year. The approach that we decided to take was a pragmatic one, really, to try and make the gathering of the data for the carbon footprint as simple as possible. So whilst it's obviously very important for reasons of, you know, a sensible amount of accuracy to gather all of the large sources of emissions of things that are under the direct control of the council, you know, those all must be included. We weren't trying to include every little last thing necessarily, because we felt it was more important to start this process and have an understanding, a basic understanding of how to move forward. And before this work started, the council had never really thought very much at all about what its emissions were. So this is an important first step, I think, into understanding what the council's carbon footprint is, so that it can implement its policy of net zero carbon emissions by 2030, which is a big challenge for the council to work towards. So what I have pulled together for you here, and I must recall my thanks to my colleague Eileen Dennehy, the accounts assistant, who gathered all the energy data to include in this report, so that we could have electricity and gas usage figures. So the basic footprint is described by the table on page 10 of your papers at item 3.1. So that covers all the electricity and gas usage at the council and some estimates of the carbon emissions caused by paper usage, plastic sacks, waste, and we've also the parks services fuel usages included there. We've talked previously about scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 emissions. And as I said, the basic approach we took was for things that are under the direct control of the council. Now I have included in this table staff commuting mileage as a total figure. So I didn't want to in any way identify individual staff or even teams within the figure I reported. I've just reported a total figure to avoid identifying individuals. But I did think that it was worth including that number, but I should say that that's not something that every group will do. And Tony has a lot of experience with working with different sorts of organisations, so he will perhaps give a better context with that. But the size of the staff commuting mileage, total emissions, is relatively large compared to some of the other items. So I felt that justified its inclusion in the figures, but you may wish to discuss that and take another view. And also bearing in mind that council policy is able to determine the amount of staff commuting mileage in the sense that, for example, the council has a policy to support cycling. So staff who might be able to and wish to cycle to work can apply for funding to buy cycling equipment if they wanted to do that. And of course, the council's working from home policy has a large effect on the amount of staff commuting mileage. And yes, so in the end, my calculation, which please challenge if there's anything you think I may have missed or got wrong, because this is the first time I put this forward and I might have missed something. So I think the council's carbon footprint is about 132 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. So that's the number, that's the challenge before the council to achieve net zero by 2030. As I say, I'm not trying to be accurate to within a kilogram, but I would say hopefully within sort of 10%. That's a good estimate.
Donna, you had a question. Sorry.
Sorry, Donna.
Sorry to make more work for you, but I don't know if it's, I don't want to make more work for you, but just one obvious thing is like councillors attending like meetings and how they get there. Obviously, some people live near them further than others. And I expect Ken would have to drive because it's too far for him to walk.
I think we should have a council policy that all councillors walk.
Well, no, because Ken lives right at the
I
top of
was
the hill.
joking,
Just
sorry.
remember, Donna, I've got a bad knee.
Yes. No, I just wondered.
I think you make a good point. If you
I
have,
don't want any more work for you, Fiona. I truly don't. But I just thought, well, maybe there could be like a counsellor thing. Maybe I don't know, but I don't want to make any more work for you at all.
Right.
that's very generous of you. Thank you for that.
No.
Patrick.
A couple of things. I'm slightly confused. There's weight of plastic sacks, and then there's waste plastic sacks, which seem to be exactly the same figure. So they appear
No,
to come.
they're not the same figure. You have to, in scope 3, you have to record materials purchased, and then you also have to record waste disposal. What is actually missing from here is the waste that's in the plastic sacks. And I communicated that to Fiona last Friday, I think it was. That has to go in as well, because that is a council responsibility. But the two things are, you've got paper amount purchased, 951, and then waste kilograms of envelope purchased, but actually turned as waste. So you record both the different conversion factors for the production of plastic sacks and the disposal of them.
Yeah, and the other question is that if you take the figures on the right column there, they don't add up.
Which do you mean?
Well, that scope 3 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. We've got, if you do a quick cast down there, there is not 132,000 in there.
You add in 132,000. You add in 112,000, which is column 1, 2, 3, 4, and column 6, which is 20,000.
Okay, right.
And
thank you.
Let me just explain what column 4 is. That's what's called scope 1, which is the scope 1 to scope 2. So that's fossil fuels and also electricity.
Right.
Scope 3 is all.
Thank you.
Okay. So the conversion factors, which is column 3, that's the conversion factors for the scope 1, scope 2.
Yeah, great.
So the items that are missing are the waste that are disposed of. In other words, household waste that goes into bins on the meadows, and also water. You need to record both the water used and the water that goes to the drains. If it's used on the meadows, then it doesn't go into the drains. But the point being is that to get water to your house or your office, you need to have energy to get it there. To get water from the drains, you need to have the processing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll shut up. Next point,
Right.
Anyone? Any other questions?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay. Are you happy with the comment about councillors, Fiona?
I'm just trying to think how I have to ask all of the councillors how many miles they travelled in a year.
Or what you do is work out how many miles they would travel to go to a committee meeting and a full council meeting. And just do it that way and do an approximate way forward. And to find out also whether they're walking like Donna or taking a taxi like Ken because of his knee. That's the way to do it. Jackie, sorry.
I'm curious if other councils have policy on this, as the councillors aren't employed by the council. They're elected to the council, and they will live in all different areas and have different ways to get to the council. And they're also required to be in person at meetings. So they don't have a particular choice in that. So I'm curious what if other councils have a policy, and what considerations should be taken for this council on making this policy.
May I answer that? First of all, I think every council have it different. And from a commercial perspective, I had not seen staff commuting coming in the commercial carbon footprints I've done, but I recognise that it's now in scope 3. And when we did the training of councillors, what we said was the council has to decide what are the boundaries of their carbon footprint. So they make the decision. And provided you tell people what you're doing, you can do it or not. But I would have thought that as you've got staff commuting in, you should have councillor commuting in as well, or councillor travel, let's put it that way, because it's not commuting as such.
I think what I'd be cautious about is anybody, for example, a female going in of an evening in the winter, in the dark, feeling any pressure to not go in by car. That's what I would be cautious about.
Ken, you had your hand up. Does that apply to you?
Yeah, I could do as well. I'm against this. I'm just trying to work out now, and I can only think basically there's myself and Stefan that probably go by vehicle. I think the large majority of councillors walk to the meeting. So I can see where Donna's coming from, but I don't think the mileage is going to make much difference to those figures that you've got down there. You know, you're talking about a mile into town for me, 2 miles for Stefan, and you know, it's just so minimum. I think it would just take up too much time. It'll be a waste of time. But I can understand where Donna's coming from.
I don't want to make it for anyone.
Yeah, I wouldn't take this any farther.
Oh, don't just leave it, please.
And this is where the council deciding its own boundaries is important. So I think if that's the views of the group
I
as a
think
whole.
actually it's a more even split. I think it's the men and the mayor that drive, and it's the females that walk. Already, that's how it is. That's how I see it. It's the men and the mayor that drive, and it's the females that walk. I can't think of anyone that's different to that rule at the moment.
Yes, Will Hamilton walks, Lawrence walks, chap Buckley, he walks, Rob Romans walks, I walk from the car park. I think it's fairly evenly split. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there.
I wish I hadn't said anything now.
No, I'm pleased you said something.
To raise it.
It was, yeah, and it's entertaining to hear the comments as well.
And
any other? Go ahead. Sorry, Fiona.
I would just, so from a purely sort of scientific data point of view, it seems certain that the councillor travel mileage would be much smaller than the staff mileage, just because of where the councillors are and live, and where the staff live. So it would be a much smaller number. So there's a question as to whether it's worth the effort to calculate it, given that we know it's going to be a lot less than the other numbers.
I've just got the solution, Chairman. I think we should employ all staff from Henley in future.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Your contributions is valued, and I think you should actually talk to your HR manager at the same time. Right. Any thoughts? Any further thoughts on this? Can we just take it quickly back into the context of net zero? If you look at the buildings, there's a total of 77 kilos, 77 tons, roughly, out of the whole 132 tons. And vehicles represent about 23 tons. The decarbonisation, which Fiona talked about earlier as part of the project progress, is not going to be sufficient, even if you could capture, even if you could tackle all those electricity and gas emissions. It's not going to be sufficient to reduce the total emissions to zero. So the challenge for the council going forward is how we actually address that. Patrick?
Plant trees.
That's one solution. There needs to be others as well. But I think we are talking about that, and it's not something that we need to discuss now, but let's recognize that when you add in waste, when you add in water, you've probably got 150 tons, something like that. And that makes a big challenge, I think. But let's go on that. Fiona, you had a list of in the annex of all the Henley Town Council properties and sites. Is there any comment to make on that?
I included it because I thought it was important in the context of, being happy with the baseline, that you understood what it was a baseline of, or, what the assets of the council were. So this is a list taken from the accountancy overview of all the rents and things that the council receives for different sites and properties. So you can see all the different things that are going on.
Could we add in another column, which is where it's a commercial let, for example, the 32 Marketplace, whether in fact the electricity and gas is paid for by the council or not? So we're clear about who's got responsibility.
Yes, I can do that. I don't think the information isn't readily available.
No, I'm sure it's not
now, but I think Eileen and I can probably.
But if we're going to make this,
if
we're going to make it meaningful, we need to identify clearly all the gas and electricity that the council is responsible for. And equally, one of the things we've discussed is the other vehicles the council has, like the Henley Hopper, which is contracted by the council. But I don't believe the Henley Hopper takes any revenue. Any revenue comes directly to the council as part of the senior rail card, most of whom are travellers. So the Henley Hopper diesel comes in as well, I believe. Sarah?
Thank you. Can I just clarify something you said, Tony, which was there is no agreed way for any council to measure their carbon footprint? Like there isn't a standardized, here's the guidelines type thing?
The point is that every organisation, whether it's commercial or public, has to define its own boundaries, and they have to declare the boundaries. So in some of the reports, some organisations don't go right the way through to say staff commuting. They treat that as being not within their boundaries, because let's be honest, sometimes staff commuting can be by bus or can be by Rolls Royce. I'm taking the extremes there, but it is different. The requirements of the reporting are that the council or whomever define the boundaries.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I was just wondering if we've just found out what other councils in our local region, which I'm going to get mixed up, Oxon has done. Like, is there opportunities to liaise or just find out what others have done, and maybe we can even share if we're way ahead of the curve, if there's opportunities for us to celebrate and champion and shout about the positive things that we're having a go at Henley Town Council.
I suspect Henley Town Council is ahead of the game in terms of other councillors, but I can find out from Reading. We can probably find out, well, SODC I think haven't got a clue, but there are other councillors we can probably find out, Patrick?
We could look at Tame,
Yeah.
Didcot, Wallingford, the major towns,
Yeah.
and see where they're at.
Yeah.
And so the final thing I had was just in terms of understanding how energy providers bears any impact on this, renewable energy suppliers as part of the
If you have
broader scheme of offsetting and stuff
renewable
like that in the
energy,
future.
you'd have, like solar panels, you'd have a different conversion factor. There, if you look at the conversion factors that are in DEFRA's guides, they are grid average conversion factors. So it doesn't take account of the different. If you have a specific zero energy supplier, then that would be something you take into account separately.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It kind of does. I suppose my really basic question is the energy provided to the council and all of these amazing properties, is there anything we can do to encourage them to go to renewable energy, for example?
You wouldn't been able to do it to the properties if they're let and they're paying for it themselves. That's their responsibility. Unless we can persuade them in a communication sense. Go on, sorry, Fiona.
Yeah, so the council's renewed its electricity contract with a renewable supplier. Its gas supply contract is not due for renewal for a while. So I think, and it's 12 months away, if I remember correctly. And so it will look at possible renewable suppliers for that at that point. But as Tony says, for example, in the case of Brunner Hall, the tenant is a registered charity. So they select their own energy supplier in order to benefit from charity electricity supply rates. Whereas other tenants, for example, the tenants in the Lightningham Pavilion, pay the council for energy and we procure the supply, which is now being done through a renewable energy supplier. So it's different for different buildings. But if Tony says I'm marking the annex, which building follows which method, then that will be clearer.
Sarah, does that answer your question? Because you had a...
It does, thank you.
Right, okay. Well done then, Fiona. 10 out of 10. Any other questions? No. I think this is a very good start. I know that there's points I think that they're missing, but that's not the point. This to get what my experience is that when organizations do carbon footprint, most of them have got good financial reporting systems. They've actually got absolute rubbish reporting systems, non-financial reporting systems. And this is all non-financial, which normally wouldn't be retained as part of an account system. So this is going from 0 to almost 90% at this stage. There'll be more coming in as we look at more depth, but actually this is a very good start by Fiona and all the people who've been helping you. So thank you for that. Any comments before we want to go? What's the next step with this, submitting this, Fiona?
So obviously, I'm very pleased to have a little bit more work to do on it, because it's not surprising to me that in my first draft I didn't find everything. So thank you very much for that. That's really helpful. So I'll go away and work on the weight of the waste and the emissions from water supply as well, and add those in. And then I suppose my only question would be, do you want the baseline to come back to this group again, or would you be happy for it at that point to go to the planning committee for approval?
I've got a comment to make on that, but before that, any comments from other people?
I was only going to say that I think it's extremely helpful, because you can immediately see where the biggest source of CO2 is, and also that gives you an idea for the actions that need to be taken to reduce it. So I think it's a very, very good start.
Any other comments? Okay, in terms of your question, I'd like to review it because I think we need to make the table a bit clearer. If Patrick can't read it properly with a PhD, then other people won't be able to either. Or whatever diploma you've got, Patrick, or GC.
Yeah, GCEs, yes.
But the real question, and the reason for making it clear, is how do we communicate it? And I think that's something the council has to think about. What you can't just say you've got 132 tons of carbon dioxide. You have to be able to communicate what it relates to and so forth. And I think you ought to be talking to Kath certainly, but perhaps even Naomi, the communications officer, as to what you communicate. And the question that you're going to get is, so what are you going to do about it? And I think that is the bigger issue. But first of all, decide how you communicate and what you communicate.
It would be really nice to know how many trees you need to mitigate this amount.
A lot, an awful lot.
Exactly.
Can I just relate to that? Because when we started going through this with, I'll pick you up a moment, sorry, don't worry. When we did this with Liz Jones, who's the finance manager, she was talking about the current tree survey, which is undergoing, and made the point exactly that you just made, Rebecca, which is that we should actually be offsetting the total emissions by the amount of trees that are currently in situation. And there is a plan, I think, Fiona, to actually use a software company to actually look at what the emissions are. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a tree survey being conducted, or started very shortly, I think, and as part of that, the information on the age and the species of the trees can be used to estimate the carbon sequestration achieved by those trees.
Okay. Sarah, can I pick up you first of all, and Donna?
Yeah, so I'm mindful that when we communicate this wider, I mean, I do want to emphasize it. I think it's a really brilliant start, and that's why I was going on about how can we share the learning that we've done here at Henley with others to help them on their net zero journey too. And I suppose one of the basic questions we may get back is just recognizing that the year of the baseline is pre-COVID. So, you know, you've got the classic questions, well, everyone's now working from home, then how do you keep measuring? And, you know, what are our carbon emissions in the intervening years? So it's just being mindful of that. And I think also, much as I love tables and figures, having done a math degree, I was always struggling with, well, here are the conclusions, and kind of it's that filling in the gaps. It's like, this is what this means, this, and using language that people can understand. So that really helpful analogy about, well, how many trees does it equate to? Because 132 tons, I can't grasp it. I really can't understand what that means. And maybe there are others who aren't so savvy with the carbon footprint, all the technical scientific data. It's like, so is that good? Is Henley terrible in comparison to others? Are we doing okay? But obviously we want to save the planet and do as much as we can. So I think just some grasping of what 132 tons means could be helpful as we seek to communicate and really seek to help the wider public know why this is such a big priority for Henley Town Council.
That's a very good point. I mean, to give my experience, I've dealt with one company. I did the carbon footprint for about 15, 20 years. And that had 250,000 tons, but it operated in 75 countries. And what you've got to do, if we're going to do a comparison, I think it's worthwhile doing a comparison. We should do something of a similar size, rather than try and say British Airways does this or whatever, because that takes it way out of the realms of imagination. I'm going to come to Fiona in a moment, but Donna, you had a comment.
I think this has been answered, but obviously, like, the size of the tree is obviously going to suck up more carbon dioxide. So, because we've got quite a few large trees, surely we'll have more.
Yeah.
Am I myself clear?
Yes, yes, you are. You're right.
So, is there any way that you can measure how much a larger tree offsets rather than a smaller tree?
That's what's going to be done
That
by
has to be
the
factored in.
the consultants.
That's what I'm trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
you're exactly right, Donna. You know, so a young tree growing rapidly is extracting a lot of carbon dioxide, but actually an older tree towards the end of its life that's not growing as fast won't necessarily take out as much carbon dioxide. Although Patrick's shaking his head, so maybe we should check that with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, yes, you want the sort of adult trees. So you want them from 5 years through to about 50 to 60 years. They're the ones that are growing at their quickest. And then I get to 100 years and they start to top out. A lot of them stop growing.
It's very similar to human beings in that respect, isn't it?
Yes,
Patrick?
it is, yes. And just to give you an idea, if you want to sequester all the carbon that we produce, it would be wall-to-wall trees. You'd have to knock down all the buildings in Henley. We haven't got enough land. It's really simple.
Also, sorry.
So
Hang on a second, Fiona.
So my reaction to the number was that, gosh, well, if one home, I mean, SODC estimated that every home in Henley has a carbon footprint of about 9.8 tons, if I remember the number correctly, Rebecca. So this is, you know, only just over a dozen homes.
Right.
So to me, that felt really quite small as a number.
You have to be very careful about scope, because I think they're only talking about scopes 1 and 2, that our average in the UK, I think, is about 13 tons if you take in scope 3 per person. So if you've got 2 people per household, that's 26 tons per household. So we got however many households? 5,000?
5. Sorry, I'm talking about the Henley Town Council comparatively.
Yeah.
But it does highlight we need to compare on a like-for-like basis.
Like with like, yeah.
Donna, sorry.
Like with planning, I don't know if this is going to create more work, but like if someone requests to remove a tree, is there any way that they could calculate how much carbon that would be created by them removing that tree? You know, like when people put forward a planning application and they want to knock a tree down.
Kath, do you have any view on that, or do you have any idea at all? Or none at all?
Work. I don't want to create any more
No,
work.
give Kath more work. She's just sitting there.
No, how much carbon that will
I know. I'm asking Kath.
Capture rather.
I don't think that's something that's done at the moment. Whether it's something SODC would be moving to, though, because they are trying to implement climate-friendly policies.
Because then it would put people off from cutting the trees down, and also to check that people haven't already removed the trees within so many months, because I knew people would, because when I used to go and visit sites, I would see trees that had been cut down, you could tell. And is that something that could be implemented? Sorry to give you more work. Sorry.
Could you minute that as more work for Kath Adams, please, Fiona, if that's all right?
Sorry.
Patrick, sorry. And then,
I think Jackie was before me. So.
I'll go to you first.
I'm okay whichever way, Patrick.
Yeah, okay. Well, just to pick up on that, until it's in the National Planning Policy Framework, we're stuck. Because basically, we can't go beyond that, and we can't do something out of the ordinary, because then developers, and that includes individuals developing their own homes, could potentially take us to court as a council for so you can't, you know, you've got to work within the law, and until the law is changed, we can't do it.
Out of interest, this is off the top of my head, which means it's probably crap. Is there any way you can just publish that by cutting this tree down, it'll...
Yeah,
name and shame. Name and shame we could certainly do.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm working through the data at the moment because it's very difficult. It's actually incredibly difficult, and there's a very large range of results you can get in terms as to what a tree actually sequesters. Just to give you an idea, a lot of the councils use figures, and in fact the consultant will use figures that don't take account of soil carbon. They only take account of dry weight of the tree, including the roots. But the soil carbon can be up to 70% of the carbon in a tree, so, as a result of trees. So, that just gives you an idea of what the range of results. So again, we're going to have to be very careful to specify what it is that we're talking about when we do this. And it will be different if you're going to plant a tree as if you're going to cut it down. Because if you cut down a tree, that carbon doesn't suddenly disappear. It's still in the ground. Those fungi and all of the other stuff is still in the ground. So it's done its work. And so, yeah, I think we can do it, but we're going to have to be very careful about how, and be very clear about what it is that we're saying when we do that. Donna,
I think this conversation will probably be reported in total intact.
Yes, in the Henley Standard.
Jackie.
Yeah, thanks. Should we be, if we're not already, taking into account the allotments within Henley, the carbon that's used for growing vegetables and plants? Yeah. And should we be looking at how many houses in Henley have gardens, how green they are, on a positive side as to what already
you wouldn't include the houses in that. One of the things that Fiona and I have discussed with the Park Services team is actually identifying how many fertilizers they use, and this is part of the next part of reporting. So the figures will go on, and things like Henley in Bloom, there's fertilizer used in terms of those plants that go on, and I know it's not necessarily 100% council, but it's council supported. So there's a need to take into account those things. Whether you take into account what an individual does in an allotment is another question. I think
I'm thinking overall. Oh, sorry, Tony, I interrupted.
No, go on.
I'm thinking overall offsetting. If you're looking at the whole area as to the emissions of carbon, and you also need to take into account the whole area of how carbon is sequestered.
I think there'd be a big challenge for Patrick to measure that, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I think he should do so the next 2 years.
Yeah. I think one step at a time, we look at things that council has control over, so their own properties. And allotments probably come into that.
Yes, they do.
But individual gardens are the responsibility of the individual, and so that will come under their individual footprint, which is something that we're Green and Henley are trying to bat on to them about. So we can take that one on, but the council, if they look at council properties, and as you say, allotments are part of that, there will be something. The biggest one actually is peat, compost, using growing media, because that has a very detrimental effect. And I think that the parks team are looking at moving away from.
They are. We had that discussion. Yeah. Sarah, I think you might have had it. Sorry, Jackie, another point.
It was only just, I think my thought would still be some kind of general acknowledgement of the area as a whole would be good in the equation.
I think Jackie's point is quite valid in terms of communication, and just emphasising the fact that even the allotments, people are contributing to reducing carbon dioxide. But I think that's the communication. Perhaps that's when we've got the final set of figures for this period, let's actually think about how we can actually add things in which make it a rounder picture.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, in terms of just kind of big messages, I mean, the fact that there's even for the council, let alone all houses in Henley, you could not possibly plant enough trees to mitigate all of the carbon dioxide emissions. That figure on its own is a really valuable one, because it tells you immediately that you have to reduce your carbon emissions. You can't just rely on mitigation measures.
Yeah, Patrick.
The tree strategy, which I'm actually getting on to writing, and which, by the way, I'd like to call an environmental tree strategy rather than a tree management strategy, because that brings in hedges and biodiversity as well as carbon sequestration. But that, I'm looking at it in terms of Henley and what we can achieve within the parish, but then looking at it in terms of the South Chilterns, because we can't do it alone. The South Chilterns is actually relatively low, has a relatively low population, lots of land, lots of trees, and we have quite a large population, very little land, and very little space to put in trees. So there will be two elements to the tree strategy. One of them is what we can do on town council land, on private land in Henley itself, but then the other part of it will be what we can do to encourage tree planting in the South Chilterns, in our neighbouring parishes, particularly in Harpston. I'm sure they could take a few trees.
Fiona, could you perhaps record that Patrick has started writing the environmental trees management strategy and put that in the next progress report so we can monitor it?
Yeah.
Okay, any other points on this? Let's go on to, in that case, to the last item on this agenda, which is communications. Fiona, would you like to talk through?
Yes. So,
perhaps with Sarah as well.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So there's a couple of things. I don't know if Rebecca would want to say a few words about the next Henley Standard article and what's planned for those. But I did want to say thank you to Sarah for drafting a mini annual report based on the statement of achievements that this group considered at its previous meeting. The communications manager was delighted with that work. She said it's really well written and is a very useful basis for the things that we can do to communicate our work. So I've suggested that she uses that to create a web page and with click-through information. She had considered whether to use it to make video clips, but she felt that there was too much there really. You'd require too long a video, and that wouldn't quite work as a video clip. So the suggestion was a website article and then social media associated with that. So just to sort of update you that that's the plan there. I don't know if Sarah wanted to say any more about that.
Yeah, so I appreciate the feedback from Naomi. That's really kind, and I basically just copied and pasted a lot of stuff from existing members, so thanks to everyone for your feedback. I think I would be keen to explore some kind of video clips, because I think it's worth doing short 2-minute, not so much here's a covering of everything we do, but I think they would complement really well our CEWG website. So, looking at the initiatives that we do, if there can be a short interview with somebody, I think we mentioned in our informal meeting, personal stories are so key. And if we can make the most of Naomi's offer of, if we just need to line up somebody who she can go and interview, whether it's somebody signing up or driving a car club car or in the process of tree planting with Patrick, like having these very short videos, I think would be really helpful for our wider communication. I totally agree with her. Having this hour-long documentary on the Henley, working group, emergency working group would not be watchable, but these very short couple-minute clips I think would be really, really great. So I'd like to go back to say, now you've got this information, I think there's something that we can work on and try to, our next steps could be to identify just people. That's it. Thanks. Okay,
thanks, Sarah. I think Patrick wants to talk about whether he can speak on the video clips.
No, I don't want to be on video clip. Just as an example, the Parkside Trees video that Jamie made for Greener Henley was a very powerful document, and I think helped persuade a good few people on Facebook to sign and to object to the plan to cut down those trees. and that was a very successful campaign. So, as an example, just a couple of minutes is all you need to get a message across. And if it's done professionally, done well, then it comes out very well, and people will be interested, I think, and will watch it.
Okay. Sarah?
Yeah, I do take your point, Patrick, about it being done professionally, but I think we are in an age of people just doing short videos on their phone and uploading them, that it doesn't have to be overly onerous or edited. I think having someone who would be happy to do the videoing, but we wouldn't necessarily need a script per se. We would need to brief the person really well. But that's, I just wanted to, about how professional it is. I think it's important just to get content up there.
Sorry, if I could just answer that. The great thing, what Jamie bought, and it could be anyone who's in the business, is a story, because it needs to be a story with a short introduction, meaty bit, and a conclusion, and it needs to flow, and the camera shouldn't be jiggling around. It shouldn't be someone walking and talking into the thing. It's got to look rather. This is the town council. We should be doing things in a way which people gives them confidence in what we're doing. I think so. As long as if there's someone on the council, someone that can do that, then then that's great. But otherwise, I think it's worthwhile just spending a little bit of time just making sure that the things look right. Yeah.
May I suggest, Fiona, you take these two sets of comments on board and discuss them with Naomi and see how she wants to play it. Rebecca.
If you're familiar with editing software, because I've done this in a completely different context. I mean, we just filmed a Zoom meeting, and from that we cut and pasted and made just little films. So, but you don't necessarily need to pay people. Although Jamie did do a great job, I agree, Patrick. But I mean, if you've got a bit of editing software, you can make something look good, especially if it's only for a couple of minutes.
Sarah?
I think it'd be really helpful to know what it is that Naomi can offer us in terms of her time. And I mean, the original offer on the table was producer video. I think what we'd like to go back to her with is a series of short videos that kind of communicates the general things that we're involved in those key areas. It can be looking back, but it's also engagement and identifying and highlighting how we want members of the public to be involved and to join with us in fighting the climate emergency.
Would that be all right, Fiona?
Yes, yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Any other comments on communications? And Sarah, Rebecca, you're going to talk about what you're going to put forward next. One or two.
So for Henley Standard article, which will be in not this Friday but Friday after, the topic is what it's like to live in a zero carbon house. And I thought this would be particularly pertinent at the moment, particularly with gas and electricity bills going up so much. So I think we'll probably be able to wrap a good story around that. I'm going over to Springfield Meadows tomorrow in Farringdon. Jamie Pritchett, who's Ian Pritchett's son, has given me an introduction to a couple of people to talk to, and hopefully they'll be happy to have their photos taken for the paper. I've got a phone call booked with, so thank you, Patrick, for reminding me of the contact, the chap from Crest Nicholson, the sustainable chap from Crest Nicholson. And hopefully we'll be able to get some good comments from him too about sustainability. So the idea is the focus is on, well, hopefully they'll say their gas and electricity bills are no more than £30 a month or something like that. Hopefully that's what they'll say. Because then we can weave a story around how it's nice and warm and comfortable and it's very cheap to heat and et cetera, et cetera. So that's next week.
Fiona, thank you. Sorry, Rebecca, thank you very much for all the effort you're putting into it. I know it's hard to do a regular column, as I found out myself, but I appreciate it and I think it's been very successful. I'm going to go to Donna, who's got a hand up, or perhaps that's the dog.
No, it is me. She's asleep. What I was going to say, Rebecca, like you're putting in your article, because my heating packed up like 2 weeks ago and my house was absolutely freezing cold. And then I found like my front door was freezing cold and it was like I had a window open constantly. Then I found that the door had like warped also, I don't know. But what I have done is I've gone to Robert Dias and bought a £5 thing of insulation thing, and I've put it on the inside of the door because it's, and it's worked a lot. And I've also put a bolt on my door now because it means the door will align itself. So it will stop the heat coming up. If you could just put little tips like that, like to insulate the inside of your door, it will save a fortune.
Yeah, I completely agree, Donna. The and particularly in terms of drafts.
Yeah.
So that there's a charity, Draft Busters, based in Reading, and I mean, it does stuff that is incredibly cheap and very simple. But it can make a huge difference just blocking the drafts in your house. No, I agree. That's a good point.
Yeah, just simple tips and things that don't cost a lot as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Donna. And Sarah, I think Donna's very good at doing short clip videos, and talking about experience there might be useful.
Kelly is. Kelly's a TikTok star. Kelly's great at TikTok. She will teach people how to do TikTok. She gets great views.
But to be honest, Donna, that would be a great video.
Yeah, seriously, yeah.
Filming you saying how cold you are because your door is so drafty, and then maybe you can have a quick cut to Draft Busters saying about, you know, drafts in a house and how cheap and easy it is just to plug the drafts in your house. That would be a great 2-minute video.
Yeah, because it was so cold, like with no heating. I thought my house was very warm actually, but like I was honestly frozen solid.
Thank you for that contribution, Donna.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And I'm happy to help with TikTok anytime.
Kelly's a TikTok star.
Just quickly, Draft Busters. Don't know if you know Rebecca, but that's Tony Cowley.
Tony Cowley, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Any other comments on communications? If not, we'll go to Sarah.
Yes, I'm sorry that I don't know the answer to this, but Rebecca, are your Henley Standard articles clickable through from our website on the council?
Not that I know of, no.
That's a very good point.
Could we do that as a way of just saying, because you're updating it on a monthly basis?
Yeah.
That's fantastic content for us to just
And we've already got quite a lot of content because I've written about 10 now. So we've already got quite a bit of content that could go out straight away.
That's a good point. I mean, if you are writing as a member of Climate Emergency Working Group.
Yeah, good idea.
Okay. Right. Any other comments, questions? In that case, date of next meeting, please.
I wanted to suggest Monday, the 28th of March, at 3:30 again, if that time is okay for people.
When is Easter?
Not till the middle of April, so it doesn't interfere with Easter week at all.
It's not half term, is it?
What was that date? Sorry, in March?
Monday, the 28th of March.
Okay.
It's fine, but again, I'll be a couple of minutes late just to settle Eden into her appointment before joining.
Would you like to make it a bit later?
No, it's fine. It literally, it'll just be moments, and set a reminder on my phone not to forget this time.
Yeah, and could you turn the Hoover off, please, at the same time?
Absolutely.
Okay. Right. So is that all right for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. What we should do now then is close the meeting and